The first tremor was small, just enough to make the teacups shiver on Master Jian's shelf. The second one shattered them. High in the orbital monastery, alarms wailed. Scarlet glyphs flashed across the dojo's panoramic windows, reflecting the unnatural warping of the stars outside. Jian rose from his meditation, his composure as placid as a still lake, a stark contrast to the screaming emergency klaxons. "Master," his apprentice Mira called out, her voice breathless and tight with panic. "It's happening. The seals... they're breaking." Jian exhaled a long, slow breath. The sound was almost lost in the chaos. "So the old stories were true," he said, his voice calm, yet carrying a weight of ancient knowledge. For 10,000 years the galaxy had whispered legends of the Xhor-Ka. They were ancient beasts, sealed away beneath the crust of desolate, forgotten worlds. Creatures older than civilization itself, older than recorded time. They were myths, bedtime stories meant to frighten young pilots. They were not supposed to be real. They were certainly not supposed to awaken. But something or someone had disturbed their cosmic prisons. The station quaked again, a violent, bone-jarring lurch. This time, the very walls bent inward, as if colossal, unseen claws were pressing against the hull from the outside. Mira's voice trembled, her youthful confidence stripped away by raw terror. "What do we do?" "What humans always do," Jian replied, his movements deliberate as he tied the crimson sash around his waist. "We stand." The words had barely left his lips when the hull burst like cheap paper. A leviathan of obsidian bone and molten flesh ripped its way into the station. Its roar was a physical force, the sound of an exploding sun that shook them to their core. A singular burning blue eye fixed its gaze upon Jian. It was a look of ancient, malevolent intelligence, as if it remembered him. Or perhaps it remembered his kind. Mira, recovering from the initial shock, bravely drew her plasma staff, its blue energy humming in the sudden, tense silence. Jian raised a hand, a simple, calming gesture. "Stay behind me." The creature lunged, a mountain of flesh and fury moving with impossible speed, but Jian was faster. He moved. Kung Fu in zero gravity was a concept that defied physics, a discipline never meant for the void. Yet Jian flowed with perfect, deadly precision. Every motion was a flawless calculation of velocity, inertia, and balance. He slammed his open palm into the monster's jaw, a seemingly gentle touch that redirected its immense momentum. He used its own colossal weight against it. The beast careened sideways, smashing into a main support pillar with a deafening crash that shook the entire monastery. Mira stared, her eyes wide with disbelief. "Master, your hands." Jian glanced down. His skin was glowing with a faint, golden light, intricate patterns tracing their way up his arms. "The chi gates awaken," he murmured, almost to himself. "I had hoped I would never need them, but there was no time for reflection." A second monster, this one armored in jagged crystalline stone, climbed through the gaping rift in the hull. Then a third clawed its way in, followed by a fourth. The station groaned, protesting under the weight of these impossible horrors. Mira's whisper was barely audible. "We can't fight them all. Then we finish this before they all rise." Jian's voice cut through the noise, sharp and clear. He sprinted, defying gravity, launching himself across the dojo at the nearest beast. He spun into a spiraling kick, a move of breathtaking grace and devastating power. A shockwave rippled outward from the point of impact, snapping bone and disintegrating the creature's stony armor. The monster was thrown against the far wall, pinned there by the sheer force of his strike. "Master," Mira shouted, her voice a mix of awe and fear, "your body can't handle that level of chi." "The old teachings, the eon of destruction, yes," Jian finished, landing as lightly as a falling leaf. "But destruction is a tool, not a destiny." The first and largest monster had recovered. It reared up, its gaping maw opening like a collapsing star. From within, tendrils of pure dark energy spiraled forward, a vortex of anti-light that devoured everything it touched. Jian inhaled deeply. The air around him stilled. His own heartbeat seemed to slow to a single powerful beat per second. His eyes, once calm and brown, now burned with a golden flame. He shifted his weight, dropping into the legendary dragon stance. The darkness fired. Jian met the wave of absolute annihilation with a single, extended palm. The impact should have vaporized him, should have erased him from existence. But instead, the impossible happened. The energy bent. It curved, spiraling around his hand like water flowing around a stone in a stream. With a final focused effort, Jian redirected the torrent of darkness upward. It punched a clean hole straight through the monastery's roof, venting harmlessly into the cold vacuum of space. For the first time in a million years, the monster hesitated. It had just learned a new emotion: fear. "Humans," Jian said, his voice quiet but echoing with the power of generations, "do not bow to ancient terror." He launched himself forward again, a blur of motion that Mira's eyes couldn't even process. Each strike he delivered glowed with the intensity of sunfire. Palm, fist, elbow, heel, each one carried the combined strength of 10,000 years of human discipline and willpower. The monster's obsidian armor cracked under the onslaught. Its single blue eye dimmed. Its colossal body collapsed, dissolving into a cloud of drifting, harmless embers. The remaining monsters roared, a chorus of rage and grief for their fallen kin. Jian landed beside Mira, his chest heaving. Sweat poured down his face and the golden glow around him flickered and sputtered like a dying candle. "Master, you're burning yourself out!" Mira cried, her training forgotten in her concern for him. "Then let my last breath be a worthy one." He raised his hands, preparing for the final charge. Just then, the station's core, damaged beyond repair, finally ruptured. The dojo shattered into a million drifting shards as the cold, silent vacuum claimed the monastery. In the silent void, Jian danced. He became a comet of golden fury, a single point of light weaving between titanic, shadowy predators. Each strike detonated like a miniature star in the darkness. Each graceful motion carved trails of pure light through the black. Mira clung to a piece of floating debris, a helpless spectator to this impossible ballet. She was witnessing a legend unfold. One human against the oldest and most powerful monsters in the galaxy. And he was winning. But even legends burn out. Jian staggered in the middle of a strike, his chi faltering for a split second. It was the only opening the monsters needed. One of them seized the opportunity, its massive jaws closing around him. "Master!" Mira's scream was a silent prayer in the void. A final brilliant burst of golden fire erupted from the monster's grip. It was blinding, pure, and absolute. The creature's head exploded into nothingness. Jian drifted free. Limp, silent. Mira pushed off the debris, propelling herself through space to catch him as he floated. His eyes fluttered open, the golden light almost gone. "The seals must be reforged," he rasped, his voice a ghost. "You can't," she cried, tears freezing on her cheeks. "You'll die." He managed a weak smile. "Humans die. But our stand, our defiance, that echoes forever." His chi flared one last time, a nova brighter than all the surrounding stars. The remaining monsters, sensing the unimaginable power about to be unleashed, turned to flee, but it was too late. The blast consumed them, a wave of pure righteous energy that cleansed the stars. When the light finally faded, a profound silence had returned to space. Mira floated alone, holding the last fading embers of her master's light. "Humanity will remember," she whispered to the endless night. "And the monsters will fear." Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more tales from across the cosmos. We'll see you in the next one. Silence drifted through the shattered remains of the orbital monastery. Fragments of pillars, tatami tiles, and ancient scrolls floated like the dust of a broken civilization. Mira clutched Master Jian's dimming chi ember against her chest, trying not to let her breath hitch. "He can't be gone," she whispered to herself, even though she had felt his final surge of power. "Master, what do I do now?" The ember pulsed faintly against her skin, just once. As if in answer, Mira wiped her eyes and forced herself to focus. Jian had given everything to destroy the awakened beasts, but even in his final moments, he had warned her. The seals must be reforged. The implication sent a chill down her spine. If the monsters Jian fought were only the first wave, then more were coming. Across the void loomed the dying crescent of Leather-Anine, the desolate world where the ancient Xhor-Ka had been imprisoned millennia ago. Its crust was cracked, glowing with an eerie light and trembling with seismic fury. It was like a monstrous heartbeat returning after thousands of years of sleep. Mira tightened her grip on the chi ember and ignited her thrusters. She pushed toward her shuttle. weaving through the wreckage. Every shadow looked like a claw waiting to snatch her out of the emptiness. Halfway there, her cum crackled to life. Lo? Hello? This is the strike frigate's solar warden. We detected a massive energy blast. Is anyone alive out there? Mira exhaled sharply, a gasp of relief. I'm alive, apprentice Mira of the monastery of the Red Dragon. My master, he fell in battle, but listen carefully. Lethra 9 is awakening. The Xhor-Ka are returning, static. Then, a firm voice replied, understood. Get aboard your ship and rendezvous with us. We're moving in. Humanity didn't waste time. The moment Mira stepped onto the frigate's deck, she saw the urgency etched into every face. Soldiers sprinted down corridors, officers shouted coordinates, and engineers loaded kinetic warheads into launch tubes. There was no panic, just cold, hard purpose. Apprentice Mira? Asked Captain Solon. He was tall, stoic, his face scarred by battles against lesser horrors. Your master was the galaxy's strongest martial weapon. If the monsters killed him, what are we facing? Mira opened her palm, revealing Jian's fading chi ember. Something older than war. Something that fears humanity waking up. The captain's jaw tightened. Then we fight. Before she could respond, alarms blared across the bridge. A voice shouted over the intercom, gravitational anomaly. Lethra 9 is breaching. A massive hologram sprang to life in the center of the room, showing the planet splitting open like a cracked egg. Plumes of lava erupted into space. Clouds of ash spiraled into the void. But the true terror was what climbed out of the fissures. Serpents made of screaming stone. Colossi of molten iron. Winged beasts that shed fire from their feathers. And something else. Something enormous moving just below the crust. Something larger than a continent. The bridge fell silent. Captain Solon whispered, "Gods help us." Mira corrected him softly. "No gods, just us." The frigate unleashed its full fury. Railguns fired tungsten spears, missile salvos streaked across the sky, and plasma beams carved molten trenches into the planet's surface. The explosions lit the void like terrible fireworks. And the Xhor-Ka didn't even flinch. One of the stone serpents coiled upward and struck the solar warden with its tail, sending shockwaves through the entire hull. Consoles burst into sparks. Officers were thrown from their stations. "Maneuver! Maneuver!" Solon shouted, trying to keep his footing. Mira braced herself, clutching the chi ember. For a heartbeat, she saw a reflection in the viewport, Jian's outline flickering in the glow. She blinked. It wasn't a memory, it was a warning. The ember flared in her palm, suddenly burning hot. Mira's knees buckled as raw, unstable chi surged through her. Burning like liquid iron, she cried out, falling to one knee. Solon rushed to her side. "Mira, what's happening?" "Master," she gasped. He left more than power. He left a message. The ember projected a vision into her mind, Jian, radiant and calm, speaking from beyond his sacrifice. "Mira, you were never just an apprentice. You are the heir. The seals require a human heart, and a human willing to stand where even masters fall." Mira's breath hitched. He knew he wouldn't survive. Jian's image smiled. "Then live, and finish what I began." The vision faded. The ember in her hand dimmed permanently, its warmth gone. Mira rose to her feet, not steady, but ready. "I need a drop pod," she said, her voice clear and strong. Solon stared at her. "You can't be serious, that planet is crawling with monsters?" Mira stepped toward the viewport, her eyes blazing with a newborn chi-light. "Then that's exactly where I need to be." The ship groaned as something colossal slammed against its shields. Time was running out. Solon made his choice. "Prep the pod. Give her every augment, every battery, every blade we've got." Mira took a deep breath, chi swirling like a storm around her. She wasn't Jian, but she was human. And humans did not run from ancient nightmares. They charged straight into them. As the drop pod sealed around her and fired toward the burning world below, Mira whispered, "Master, guide my fists." The monsters roared as the human meteor fell toward them. Thanks for watching. Be sure to subscribe for more. Mira's drop pod was a streak of fire carving across the sky of Lethra 9. Below her, the ground writhed with monsters. Stone leviathans tore themselves free from the planet's crust. Molten titan beasts stamped craters into the earth, and shadow-winged horrors circled above like vultures waiting for the end. And somewhere beneath it all was the thing that stirred the planet like a giant, beating heart. Mira braced as the pod shook violently. Impact in 5-4. A winged Xhor-Ka, a nightmare of claws and teeth, snapped its jaws around the pod mid-fall. 3. Metal screeched. Alarm screamed. 2. Mira clenched her teeth, chi pulsing under her skin like captured lightning. 1. She detonated the pod from the inside. A column of golden light erupted from the sky as Mira burst outward, spinning into a comet of burning chi. The winged monster shrieked as she carved straight through its torso, splitting it clean in half. Its remains rained across the battlefield in a grotesque shower. Mira landed in a freshly made blast crater, kneeling, one hand pressed to the shuddering ground. Her entire body trembled. "Master, this chi, it's too much." Before she could finish, the ground beneath her erupted. A stone serpent, easily 100 meters long, lunged from the earth with a sound like mountains screaming. Its obsidian fangs, each the size of a shuttle, aimed straight for her heartbeat. Mira exhaled. The tremor in her limbs vanished. She rose into the flowing river stance, her hands waving gently, guiding invisible currents of power. The serpent struck. She didn't meet its force with her own. Instead, she slapped its jaw aside. Not with strength, with direction. The beast slammed headfirst into the ground, embedding itself like a spear thrown by a god. Mira leapt onto its massive skull, driving her heel downward. Chi exploded through the stone with the force of an earthquake. The serpent cracked apart like shattered pottery. Another monster roared behind her, then another, then 10 more. The entire planet seemed to shake awake, enraged at the sight of a single human challenger. Across orbit, aboard the Solar Warden frigate, Captain Solon watched the impossible unfold on his view screen. "Sir," a young officer whispered, his voice trembling, She's killing them. They're surrounding her and..." "She's holding." Solon swallowed hard, his throat dry. "Then we back her with everything we've got." He barked his orders. "Railguns online. Targeting coordinates locked." Turning to the tactical officer, he commanded, "Fire around her, not at her. She's the spear point, we're the hammer." The frigate unleashed thunder. Tungsten rods, moving at a fraction of light speed, slammed into the ground around Mira. They carved deep trenches and blasted monsters away from her path, clearing a corridor through the chaos. The whole planet erupted in smoke and flame. But even through the maelstrom, one thing was clear. Mira was heading somewhere. Straight toward the largest fissure in the planet's surface. Straight toward whatever was climbing out. The fissure was miles wide, glowing like the mouth of an angry star. The heat should have vaporized her, but her chi formed a shimmering barrier around her body. Mira approached, each step cracking the scorched earth under her feet. She reached the edge and looked down and froze. A shape so massive it made mountains look like pebbles was rising. It wasn't a beast, it was something worse. Something intelligent. A gargantuan humanoid form of molten ore and shifting metal, crowned with horns that scraped the sky. Each breath it took seemed to bend reality itself. Its eyes were forge fires, burning with an age older than memory. The Xhor-Ka Prime, the first, the last. The king of the planet killers. Its voice was a quake that vibrated through Mira's bones. A human. The word was less a sound and more a physical force. A mortal flesh spark dares to stand where empires crumbled. Mira's fists clenched. Her chi flared, spiraling into a blazing golden aura that pushed back the oppressive heat. "You killed empires," she said, her voice steady. "But you've never fought humanity." The Titan leaned closer, its shadow swallowing the horizon. "Humanity is new, small, brief. Maybe." Mira took a deep breath, the air superheating as it entered her lungs. "But we learn fast." The Titan lifted a hand the size of a city block. "Then learn this." It crushed the ground where she stood. The impact obliterated mountains. For a moment, the entire battlefield went still. The monsters paused, the sky dimmed. Lava froze mid-flow. From orbit, Captain Solon could only whisper her name. "Mira." Then light erupted. Golden chi burst upward from the crater like a newborn sun. The shockwave vaporized half the battlefield. Stone serpents shattered. Winged fiends disintegrated into ash. The trembling of Lethora 9 paused, as if the planet itself was stunned into silence. Mira rose from the center of the crater, her feet hovering inches above the molten ground. Her eyes burned with pure golden flame. A spectral dragon, massive, luminous, ancient, coiled around her shoulders, its ethereal form roaring silently at the heavens. "Master," she whispered, a sense of calm washing over her. "I hear you." The Titan staggered back, its burning eyes wide with something it hadn't felt in millennia. Disbelief. Impossible. Mira extended her hand. Round 2. She shot forward faster than sound, faster than thought. The Titan swung its colossal arm. She weaved between its fingers, her chi streaking behind her like comet tails. She landed on its forearm and struck with an explosive palm, cracking its metallic skin. She leapt upward, carving through its molten armor with a flurry of blinding kicks. She reached its chest, where a molten core was now visible through the fractures, and drove both palms forward. "Dragon's heart burst!" The core erupted in golden fire. The Titan screamed, an earth-shaking, sky-shattering, ocean-boiling sound of pure agony. It fell, a mountain collapsing. A world-ending beast, defeated, by one human. As the Titan's body cooled into a mountain of steaming rubble, Mira collapsed to her knees, her chi flickering like a dying ember. She stared at her trembling hands. "Master." "I did it," but the ground rumbled again. Something moved beneath the rubble. Something was still alive. The battlefield was silent. Steam drifted from the cooling corpse of the Xhor-Ka Prime, its molten armor cracking like dying suns. Mira knelt, gasping, her chi aura flickering weakly around her. I finished it," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Master, it's done." But the ground disagreed. A low vibration rolled through the shattered plains, slow, deep, patient. Something shifted beneath the Titan's rubble. It wasn't struggling. It wasn't wounded. It was unfurling. Mira rose shakily, her fists half-clenched. "No, you can't be alive," but it wasn't the Titan that moved. From beneath its massive corpse, a shape slid upward. At first, it just looked like a shadow. Then it grew. And grew. A sinuous, obsidian-black form coiled through the dust, remorseless, wordless, and cold. It didn't roar. It didn't scream. It simply arrived, the air around it distorted, gravity bent. Space itself seemed to hum with a terrible energy. Mira stumbled back. This wasn't another Titan. This was something older. Something the Titans obeyed. A presence spoke not with sound, but with a thought that slid into Mira's mind like ice. The Prime was a child. The shadow being towered over her, stretching like a living void. It had no eyes, no face, no defined body. Just a shifting cosmic silhouette against the ruined sky. "We are the root, the first fear, the silence before creation." Mira's heart hammered against her ribs. This was no beast. No Titan. This was a Xhor-Ka ancestor, the architects of the prisons, the creators of the monsters, the oldest of the ancient darkness. She swallowed hard, trying to find her courage. "If you're so old, why hide beneath the others?" The shadow seemed to tilt, as if amused by her question. "They were bait." Mira froze. "The Prime drew your master, and your master drew you." Her stomach dropped. It was a trap, all of it. "You are the key," the voice continued. "Humanity's rising chi was not a threat, until you walked this world." The shadow expanded, blotting out the burning sky. "Your kind was not meant to wield the dragon." Mira's breath caught in her throat. "You fear humans." "Fear?" The shadow pulsed with a dark energy. "We do not know fear. We know balance, and you break it." The ancestor rippled forward, and the world died around it. Every monster still remaining on the battlefield, the stone serpents, the molten giants, the winged horrors fell motionless. Their life force was sucked into the shadow, their bodies collapsing into dust, feeding the ancestor's expanding form until it stretched for miles into the sky. It had absorbed an entire army without making a sound. Mira backed up, trembling, but her feet hit a slab of the Titan's cooling armor. There was no escape. The ancestor's voice slithered through her skull one last time. "The dragon chose you. Now I unmake you." And it surged forward. High in orbit, aboard the Solar Warden, Captain Solon watched helplessly. "What? What is that thing?" whispered a lieutenant, his face pale. Solin's voice cracked. The planet itself dimmed when it rose. Humanity's weapons won't scratch it. Should we retreat, sir? Retreat to where? Solin snapped, then lowered his voice. If she falls, that thing will come for Earth next. The bridge fell silent. All they could do was watch as a lone human stood before an absolute nightmare. Back on the planet, the shadow lashed out. A tendril of pure void speared toward Mira, erasing stone, metal, and light from existence. She rolled aside barely, and the void carved a trench kilometers long behind her. She landed hard, skidding across rubble. Her chi flickered pathetically. No, get up. She muttered, forcing herself to her feet. The shadow descended again. Mira crossed her arms, forming a weak chi shield. The impact was immense. It hurled her through a mountain of cooling Titan ore. She smashed into the far side, spitting blood. Master, she gasped. I need you. But there was no answer, only the faintest ember of chi burning inside her chest. The ancestor's presence pressed down on her like a black hole. Humanity ends here. Mira closed her eyes, and she listened. Not for Jian's voice, but for her own, for her heartbeat. For the echo of every human who had ever stood against the impossible. She inhaled, exhaled. She raised her hands, and the ember inside her flared. But it wasn't gold. It wasn't the dragon's power. It was white, pure, untamed. Mira's eyes snapped open. What is this? The shadow sensed it. It hesitated. No. The ground cracked beneath Mira's feet as a new energy surged upward. It wasn't chi. It wasn't dragon force. It was something older. Older than the monasteries, older even than the Xhor-Ka themselves. This is not your power, the ancestor hissed. Mira stepped forward, a strange new confidence filling her. Maybe not, she clenched her fists. But it's human, her aura exploded outward, a torrent of white flame, roaring across the battlefield, forcing even the ancestor to recoil. The shadow creature actually withdrew a tendril. This was new. This was unexpected. This was terrifying. Mira cracked her neck, energy swirling around her like a newborn star. You said my kind wasn't meant to wield the dragon? Her voice deepened, echoing with a new, raw power. Good. She launched herself at the ancestor, leaving a superheated trail in the air. Because I found something better. The ancestor roared a soundless, mind-shattering scream as Mira struck its core with a punch that ripped a hole straight through the darkness. Light blasted outward. The ancestor shrieked in 1,000 voices, but it didn't die. Instead, it changed. The void solidified. It focused. It began forming a shape, something humanoid, something built to fight her. A weapon forged from the endless night. A mirror of Mira, made of pure darkness. The battlefield glowed, one side brilliant white, the other pitch black. It was like day and night had collided and decided to tear each other apart. Mira staggered back as her opponent finished forming. It had her height, her stance, her posture, her face. But it was made of shadow, featureless, and shimmering with a shifting cosmic darkness. A reflection with no soul. The ancestor's voice echoed from within it. Human strength is rooted in balance. You have none. The void Mira stepped forward, each footstep warping gravity around it, a mockery of her. A weapon tailored for one purpose, to kill the human who broke the rules. Mira swallowed hard, raising her trembling fists. You copied me? The shadow tilted its head. No, Mira whispered, the horrifying realization dawning on her. You copied what you think I am. The void Mira lunged. It was fast, too fast. A blow smashed into Mira's ribs, her chi shield cracking like glass. She flew across the battlefield, skidding across melted stone. The air burst from her lungs. Before she could even think about recovering, the void Mira was already there, a kick slicing straight toward her throat. Mira barely managed to block it. White energy erupted from her arm. The shadow recoiled but remained silent. No breath, no emotion, no hesitation. It was a perfect fighter, a perfect killer, a perfect anti-Mira. Mira rolled to her feet, panting heavily. All right, let's see how perfect you are. High in orbit, aboard the Solar Warden, Captain Solan watched the duel unfold on the tactical display. None of it made sense. Mira's strikes aren't landing, an officer said, his voice tight with tension. The thing predicts her. It doesn't predict, Solan corrected him grimly. It remembers. Every move she's ever made on the battlefield is being mimicked. Another officer's voice cut through the quiet hum of the bridge. Captain, if she falls... Solon didn't let him finish. She won't. Humans don't quit in the middle of extinction. Back on Lethera 9, the shadow advanced, relentless. Mira blocked, dodged, and countered, but with each movement, her body screamed in protest, growing slower. The white flame of her aura flickered and dimmed. She needed space. She needed to breathe. She leaped back and unleashed a wide arc of white chi, carving a massive, crescent-shaped explosion across the battlefield. The shockwave blasted dust and boulders outward in a violent spray. But the Void Mira simply stepped through it, completely unharmed. Ice crawled across Mira's spine. Okay, that's cheating. The shadow blurred forward. Mira ducked under a flaming void punch, spun, and launched a dragon's heel kick, but the shadow caught her leg mid-strike. Mira's eyes widened in disbelief. The shadow twisted. A sickening crack echoed through the air. Pain exploded up her thigh. Mira screamed, collapsing to the ground. The void being stood over her, its hand forming a blade of pure darkness. The ancestor's voice seeped through the air. You are not built for divine energy. You will break. Mira grit her teeth, forcing her shattered leg under her. Maybe... The shadow raised its blade. But humans learn. She slammed her palms together. White flame burst outward, not as a wave, but as a compressed pulse. A shock of raw life energy. For the first time, the shadow stumbled back. Mira rose, limping, her aura flaring back to life. Inside her mind, Jian's voice echoed not as a memory, but as instinct. Power repeats itself. Humanity adapts. When you face yourself, evolve. Mira steadied her breathing. The shadow copies my past, she realized. She raised her hand, bending white chi into a sphere. So I'll fight with something I've never used before. Her aura shifted, becoming fluid, spiraling, chaotic, and brilliant. It wasn't dragon stance, it wasn't river stance. It wasn't any form taught in the monasteries. It was something new. Something human. Something hers. She dropped into a stance that had no name. The turning point had arrived. The shadow attacked. Mira moved. Not with precision, but with pure unpredictability. A step that feinted left, but twisted right. A strike that curved mid-air with a spiraling burst of chi. A kick that redirected itself halfway through its arc. The shadow faltered. It tried to copy her, but it copied too late. Mira hit it with an uppercut of white flame that sent it flying into the corpse of the fallen titan. She didn't stop. She blurred after it, raining down blows wild, uneven, chaotic, but each one was laced with that raw, uncopyable white energy. The shadow tried to adapt, but it failed, because it wasn't human. It couldn't improvise, it couldn't innovate. It couldn't grow. Mira's final strike was a palm thrust, glowing brighter than the sun. The shadow cracked. It split. It screamed a silent, agonizing scream, and then it shattered like glass. The ancestor recoiled violently, its vast form shrinking, destabilizing. Impossible, you cannot. Mira stood tall, her white aura rising like a star behind her. Humans don't win because we're strong, she said, breathing hard. We win because we change, the ancestor writhed, its form dissolving. This is not your final evolution. Mira froze. What? The shadow of the ancestor dissolved into the ground like melting ink. We are not the only ancients. The ground trembled, the sky dimmed. Far across the planet, fissures opened in the crust. Not one, not 10, hundreds of them. Mira's heart sank. The ancestor's final whisper echoed in her very bones. The galaxy returns to its true age.